All right, it's June it's June 3rd, 2025, 7:31 PM. I call the regular meeting of the Town of Willington Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Members present, myself, Bob Shabbat, Andy Marco, Joe Hall. No alternatives here tonight. Applications per receipt, one PZ-25-6. Commission initiated text amendment to section 4.02E. Minimum floor area requirements and 4.21 driveway standards.
So these are the amendments that we've talked about previously. What's in front of you are the clean versions. I can bring up the proposed red lines. Starting with 3.15-4.02, and so this section that's in here, because we're going through codification, we've got the final document back. So I'm referencing and using the new organization. So you'll see the 315. So now all the town's codes will sort of fit together in one organization. And so section 315 of the town code will be the zoning regulations. So because of the timing, I wanted to use that so that it will fit in there. So with 315.4.02, that's the amendment, which is related to minimum floor area. That was a legislative change, which says we can't establish a minimum that's separate and distinct. So if you look at E, and I can bring up a red line if it would be, that would be easier to see. But basically that we used to require a minimum square footage. Let me pull it up. I don't want to make sure you can see what we've got here. So it should be coming up on the screen. I will try to zoom in. This was the previous section, which provided for some caveats, but essentially shall have a livable floor area of not less than 1,000 square feet for single family, and for two family, not less than 1,000 square feet for the first unit and 800 square feet for the second unit. The statutes basically acknowledge in the case law or the legislation that if you set a minimum floor area, you're then demanding how much the home costs. Because if they're building a new house, right, if we're talking $300 a square foot, you need $300,000 to build a house in Willington based on this regulation. And more people obviously want things that are smaller. So that language would be removed, and it would be replaced with all dwelling units shall have the minimum floor area necessary to meet all relevant building, health, or fire safety codes as may be applicable. And that's what the statute says, is if there's a building code issue or whatever, all those still apply. You can't set your own standards. So Obviously, we wouldn't enforce those other codes, but I think just for consistency, we'll reference that they need to meet them. But that's pretty, pretty standard. It's more or less a non-negotiable. We can always cap the. There we go. We can always cap how big something is, so you can certainly say you can't build a house in a certain zone or in all residential zones that exceeds a certain size. You can cap it at 2,000 or whatever, but you can't set a minimum. Okay. So this one is fairly straightforward, and we've talked about it a couple of different times. So this one is, and for this is just receipt, so we will then have to schedule the hearing, I have to do the CROG referral and all that, so it'll be a 30-day
That's
notice.
exactly what we talked about.
Yeah, right, so,
Yeah.
yep.
Anything else on that?
Not on this one, this section, that's all it is.
Driveway standards?
Yep, let me pull that one up. So, switch. Hopefully it will switch. Because it's Word. Okay. So for this one, this is more just in practice and a little bit of a cleanup, but we've had a couple of these come up and we've talked about this as part of the codification. So the current language, make it a little bit bigger, says a driveway apron permit is required by ordinance from the Board of Selectmen. So we have reference to this ordinance and a driveway ordinance that established by the Board of Selectmen. There is no ordinance. There's no ordinance or set of standards that was adopted by the Board of Selectmen that says you have to have these requirements, it has to be this wide, it can't be wider than this, you can only have one. So at least not that I've been able to find it or come up with. So, and in practice, what we do is it gets referred to Troy, he's the Director of Public Works. He reviews it, we process those permits in our office, we require a bond for anybody cutting the road, blah, blah, blah. So this is just fixing the terminology, removing the ordinance language, referencing that the Director of Public Works looks at those and then maintains the reference to the section of the zoning regulations pertaining to curb cuts with the new number. But there is no separate or set of design standards that was adopted by ordinance or one that's currently in place. So that's the first section. The number 4, it currently says culverts 15 inches in diameter at a minimum shall be used when crossing town drainage ways. I'm removing this because, again, if it's a town drainage, if it's in the right of way, then that's something that Public Works would be involved with, because obviously it's town property. If it's not, then there's generally an easement, but I don't really like having language that just basically says across the board, if you're doing this, you have to have 15 inches. There may be situations when 15 inches isn't appropriate, maybe bigger, maybe smaller. So again, that drainage is part of the review process for the site plan. It's something that Troy looks at if they're installing something, if it's part of a subdivision, obviously that all comes before the commission here as part of the overall drainage for the site. So having just a blanket statement that in every case you need this 15-inch diameter, to me didn't seem necessary, and so while I was reading through it, I thought it's something that we could strike. This next standard currently says driveway shall have an area with a slope no greater than 4% at the intersection with the street. So again, wanting cars to be flat and level when they are pulling out of the driveway, so for visibility, and to extend at least 1 car length from the street. Car lengths are 10 feet, right? And so I just am suggesting we transition that to 20 feet, which is, your longer or larger full-size SUV, but that's, most cars are gonna fall under that. And it's easier for everybody to understand what 20 feet
It
is.
can be measured and
Yeah,
you drive a smart car, you don't have a very big.
right, well, you can, your whole family can leave at the same time and you don't have to worry about it. This one, moving on to number 7, we had some existing language, I'm proposing to kind of increase it a little bit. So calling an emergency vehicle turnaround and bypass. So the language would read, driveways exceeding 200 feet in length shall include within 75 feet from the interior end, which is current language. I'm proposing to remove the adequate space for air or area for turning around of emergency medical vehicles. And instead change it to emergency vehicle turnaround area at least 10 feet wide and 30 feet deep. This is a fairly standard expectation for long driveways in a lot of towns in the area. It's more about a fire truck, less about an ambulance. Driveways exceeding 500 feet in length shall include an emergency vehicle bypass area to allow for emergency vehicle passing. Such area shall be at least 10 feet wide and 40 feet long. So again, if you got a really long driveway and you have your first responders are there and they're trying to leave and you got a fire truck or whatever, it's a 500-foot long driveway, someone's backing up the distance of that driveway. So if there's a point that one of those vehicles can pull over and you can pass, makes it a little bit easier from an operational standpoint. And it's not required that this be constructed of concrete or anything extremely expensive, but it needs to be level, adequate, so that a truck can pull off if need be, and there's enough width there. The layout of all driveways exceeding 200 feet in length shall be subject to review by the fire marshal. So previously it said may, and it was fire chief. So the plan review responsibility that we have now currently for commercial buildings, and commercial kitchens and all those types of things falls to the fire marshal. The fire chief doesn't really have enforcement stuff, and they're not part of that process. So I think that's a more appropriate term. And I think Trevor can pull in the fire chief if they needed to, but those are my suggested amendments to that section.
What would be the reason to have a minimum culvert diameter in the regulations, just so people didn't put 5 little 6-inch pipes which clog up right away and become the town's problem? Is 15 sort of a standard that keeps most debris out, or reducing clogs and stuff? Somebody must have put it in there for a reason.
Engineer at one point, maybe had that put in.
They could have suggested it, that it's generally adequate, but now, when you're talking about stormwater, no matter how much or how little, it's always about if the pipe is sized correctly for whatever needs to be conveyed through it, right?
Right,
So,
right.
But
Just thinking about it with, that by saying it's a minimum 15-inch. Most people wouldn't go pay any, so the person doing the driveway could get away with a series of 6-inch pipes based on engineering standards, which would probably clog right away, and the homeowner would have no way of knowing that they should go down there and maintain it.
Yeah.
And then the driveway wash it out, so if you say 15-inch, most sticks and stuff are going to pass through that.
Yeah.
That's all I'm thinking, is that that's probably why that would be put in.
And we're not, the goal is not to remove the obligation for there to be the driveway drainage. Just that when driveway drainage is necessary or proposed, that we evaluate the circumstance and the solution to make sure that it makes sense. So it may be that 90% of the time, what works and what is recommended by the town engineer is a 15-inch.
That's true, the town engineer is looking at this.
Right.
It's not just.
And if it's a water course or any other type of a wetland or something related to
That's
that,
completely done, it's a whole other.
then they're reviewing it, subdivision, all that stuff comes through here. I just don't like having something so rigid. Because there's bound to be a situation where less is better,
Correct.
more is better.
Oh, that makes sense.
And I think since we're looking at this. Yeah, the other thing that was in here is, and we did this for, we did this for, what's the last name? I think their last name is, her name is Terry Eccles. She's got the house on
Yeah.
Talon Turnpike.
Yeah.
She's a dentist in the, so she has a small crossing within the driveway, not because it's related to town drainage, but we had to make sure that it was constructed and the builder understood, like, well, this driveway is long, so that means fire trucks and all kinds of other things need to not collapse this pipe when. So we had to do a more in-depth review,
Sure.
because of, you know, the bigger the pipe, the more you have to worry about.
Yeah, it has to be, what, twice the invert or
You
something.
just don't wanna just
Because it's
dig a hole,
standard for that.
bury it.
Right.
So I mean, we can certainly leave it in there. I was just going through this section and I thought, you know, one size fits all is never how we wanna do zoning, but it's not necessarily broken, so if you prefer to leave it, we can certainly leave it.
No, I just wanted to talk that through, and of course, it would be reviewed by somebody, not just the builder who would be trying to
Right,
do it with the least amount of expense on his part.
correct.
Somebody would review it.
Yeah.
Bigger pipes have more fill and.
Hey, Mike, just number 10, the last sentence, references fire chief.
We'll change that. I think we already have the other one that's big, kind of, but I think we've already got it. Yeah, the other one that comes up a lot, that is, sometimes a concern when driveways are reviewed, either from an engineer or an emergency, you know, personnel, is this idea of at what point does a driveway need to be paved? So we have language in there for that, which I just lost. Get it again. Here it is, unpaved, so shall not exceed 10.
Those are town standards as well.
What do you mean?
Is that what our public works does? If dirt's more than 12%, 10%, they pay it usually.
I
I think that's,
but
you know,
only because I don't know, at least since I've been here, that there have been, if any roads have been converted from dirt to. Like,
no, I'm just saying most of the ones like Glen Eldridge Road and. Both of those steeper slopes have been paid to prevent
Yeah.
erosion.
that could be
And
it,
I wonder if that's
yes.
sort of general standard for all roads.
It certainly would make sense from an erosion standpoint, but also from a maintenance
Yeah.
and access and all those things, but, yeah. So those are the three things that I had on my mind, and we already had that one, so we haven't had any issues with it, nothing has come up. I've been sort of implementing these other things in practice, because if we get a long driveway, I've been asking for the engineer to amend the plans, just because I think it's needed, and if Trevor agrees, it gives that provision anyways. I just think it's better for them to know, so that when they design the site, it comes in with it. So again, I'm including both of these as single applications, so this would be part of the referral. So that would be scheduled. If we met the deadlines, I don't know if we could get it in, Prague would be the July meeting, most likely. So I have to give them 30 days. But with this, the only thing we would need is a motion to receive the application and schedule a public
Like,
hearing.
was that here,
That's my hand, sorry.
oh, okay, sorry.
Zoom hands
it
are
just-
yellow.
Oh,
I'll make a motion that we receive the application and submit it for public hearing.
second,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So, yeah, that will go in July, most likely.
Okay, so no public hearings tonight, no new business, brings us to item F, unfinished business, 1, application fees. Review final recommendation.
You have in front of you one pager, which is a red line and removal of, again, this isn't a regulation, but of all of the various subcategories of regulation application types. And so, you know, anything that includes a public hearing is $370. That's based upon our average cost plus the $60 state fee. Site plan review in the very infrequent chance that one would come in and it just was a site plan review. We've had a few like minor modifications. We had one last year, I think for FedEx, where they were tweaking something small, no change to the special use. So there's no hearings associated with that. So that's at 175. Application for regulation change and zone change are both at 370 because again, they require the same public hearings as a special permit. The application for a new single-family residence, we talked about that, and that's sort of the highest level of site plan review that staff does on our own. Everything else comes to the commission at some point, so that we have at 200. Again, 60 of that goes to the state, and then addition, accessory buildings, pool, all that other stuff would be at 90. Variances, same things, still requires the 2 hearing notices, and so that's at 370. I'm proposing, and I can bring up the red line again if you want. I'm proposing to strike the fee for the appeal. Most towns don't charge for the appeal. The purpose of the appeal is if someone feels that the zoning officer, in this case me, has made an error in my decision or enforcement of the regulations, and so the ZBA is the checks and balances there. So telling someone they need to submit a fee to sort of have their day in court, most towns don't charge for that. So I'm proposing we remove that. Because it, you know, again, if it were to be, if they were to agree and find that there was an error, which hopefully they don't, we shouldn't be charging someone to sort of get the answer that they were deserving of. And then special exceptions in the rare case that is the ZBA sees one of those, again, those are all the same. We had an escalator provision for like the zone map application, so it's based on the size. And changing a single parcel from a residential zone that has a building on it, from a residential zone to a commercial zone, right? The text amendment or the zone change associated with Loves is probably gonna demand a lot more time than the zone change to convert 150 acres of residential land to design elderly residential or something. So the size of the zone change is not what makes the review take longer or take less time. And it starts getting into that era of impact fees and saying bigger applications, we charge more money, which you cannot do. So this will make the fee calculations much simpler, and it'll standardize everything. I think it may. I don't think it's gonna have any effect on revenue. If anything, it'll maybe be a little bit more because we're gonna sort of equalize some of the permits that we get a little more frequently. So the E stays the same, which is the legal notice and other related expenses. So for example, when the warehouse application was going forward, there was some reason why we had to do additional noticing. Or we decided that just to cover the bases, we were gonna do additional noticing. So we assessed them an additional fee based on the cost from the paper. So all those things, we still have that flexibility if there's increased costs. If the applicant changes in the middle of I want to revise it, we're saying we have to do a new notice, we could charge them for that, so we're not getting hit with that fee twice. And then one that I will just confirm is the fee. For some reason. Touch on that.
On the zoning board of appeals, there are no out-of-pocket costs to the town for hearing that. There are no notices, there's no,
So we would still have to notice, yes.
that'd just be mailing, no.
We don't, it would be a newspaper notice.
Oh,
So
there is
we,
a newspaper.
yeah, it said,
For appeals?
all hearings have to go in the newspaper. It's by town decision for what, if any, or which types go in the,
I see, so,
so some towns charge the fee, and if the ZBA overturns the decision of the CEO, they refund the fee. At that point, the money's been expended. It's just a
I see that.
suggestion.
yeah, it's sort of like, well, I want to appeal that, well, you have to pay
$370.
$70, so like, that's screw it, I'm not gonna appeal. Kind of discourages discourse,
Yeah.
which maybe is the purpose of the
Hey. So. I can pull up this just so that you can share.
But our zoning agent never makes any errors, so we don't have to worry about that.
I don't know, have I had an appeal here? I don't think so. I don't think we've had any. I try to be as diligent as I can so that we don't get in that. I've had a couple in my career, but not many. I just need to. Well, all right. One. Each time you come.
What's the difference between a variance, asking for a variance and a zoning agent appeal?
A variance is setback is 25 and I want to be 20. An appeal is the CEO sent me a decision, a violation letter and he was wrong.
And he,
Or he denied my permit
okay,
and he was wrong.
Right.
So I'm also, this is the subdivision fee, so proposing to, again, tweak this and set it up so it would be a base fee of $350. And then an inspection fee, which remains the same, is if our town engineer has to go out and do inspections for things that are installed. Anytime there's there would be an inspection, but rather than say subdivision application shall pay a base fee of $250, which is intended to cover this, and then a fee of $85 for every 100 feet or part thereof of new road, $55 of every 100 feet part thereof for public right of way. I'm suggesting basically eliminating that again, because you can't make bigger applications pay more simply because they're bigger. And just setting a flat fee at $350.
and then,
So that would be for the application.
right,
So subdivisions don't require hearings. You can choose to have one. Unless it's a re-subdivision and then you have to have one. But a basic subdivision would not have hearings, so we would not have the $300 costs associated with noticing the hearing. I suppose that if the commission wanted to, based on E, if you had a subdivision application and you chose to hold a hearing, we could assess the applicant that charge separately for the public hearing if you held one, rather than trying to bake it into the application. But again, I'm trying to just kind of make it a little bit more consistent and not use different techniques to try to sort of pump up the revenues. And we're not seeing a lot of applications for subdivisions anyways. That time I think has passed.
and
But that section E covers sort of those additional expenses. So if we had to do a large review and we needed to bring in a stormwater I think it would be covered under some of those related expenses. So for this, it's not a regulation, so it doesn't require that this commission do anything. The next step would be if you're comfortable with these fees and you want them to go forward, we would essentially, vote to refer them to the Board of Selectmen for a recommendation. I would put together a cover memo or something just to kind of explain the process that we went through and how we arrived at them. And it would go to them for adoption.
So the quote unquote related expenses, is that gonna hold water if attorney. Questions, something in that, arena?
I think that, you know, what we would do in that case is if I sent an application to Joe Dillon for review and then he sent me a bill, we would then provide them with the bill and assess them the fee. So we would be showing them that we incurred an expense related to the application. To me, that is what to me, this is getting at costs.
Okay.
Some towns will say we have a flat $2,000 engineering fee that you pay, and if we don't use it up, we'll refund it. And they just take it right out of the beginning. That tends to, in my experience, increase the cost because when. Not speaking well of any any engineering, anybody's, but sometimes when they know that the town already has $2,000.
They're gonna use it up.
Those costs frequently come in right around that.
Gotcha.
And I was reviewing the invoices that we have from our town engineer to other towns and for similar applications, because when you look at the hours. Like what our department incurs for costs when I send stuff to him, substantially lower. Because he's going to town. Whereas, you know, a town has a third party engineer, and they've got, you know, most towns, they say, give us a cost, they say it's, okay, we're gonna $1,000. Then most towns will then bill the applicant 150%, so that if there's an overage, they don't have to. And so once they sort of know that that money's in there, you tend to do very few refunds back to the applicant and.
I just wanted to touch on that and
Yeah.
see, you know, make sure that we were
Yeah,
on solid ground with.
I mean, we could, I don't know, I guess the only thing is, because this was an ordinance, I think the language allows for the Board of Selectmen to. Consider amendments to the fees, but if we change the language, it might, that might require them to go. Through the ordinance revision
Okay.
process.
Okay.
But we could always, I mean, we could increase the base fee, or we could add, you know, we could. Include a line for an engineering review.
Well, I was trying to remember, now it's been so long since we've done this, how do we? Like, when Love's came in and they wanted to do those additional studies for the water quality. And turbidity and all that, we were able to charge that back, that was not under this,
That,
that was under the permitting.
Didn't they use their own engineering company to do it?
so the town hired the third-party wetland professional
Yes,
through the wetlands application.
that's right,
Because the wetland application, you know, has that, the third-party reviewer process.
and that's not part of this fee schedule.
No, but
That's
for
what I'm trying to,
No.
where does that fee? schedule-
that
Where-
language.
Where are we allowed to do that? That's
The wetland reg.
The wetland
regs,
regs.
yeah.
But don't we also have that we can ask for additional, and within our regs, we say we can ask for additional. Third-party things of which,
I mean, you could always ask for more than they do.
Right.
The provision in here, there's nothing in the current ordinance.
no, but within the regs themselves.
Yeah. I'd have to look, I don't know.
Because it wouldn't be a fee, it would just be, we get to charge back, I was just trying to remember where that.
Yeah,
I don't wanna delay this conversation. so
no, I mean,
I'll keep thinking,
it,
it's been so long since we poked at it.
yeah. I mean, for Loves, we had the third party under the wetlands app, which was like $10,000 and they paid it. And then when it got to you guys, I sent it to Joe Dillon for review as our engineer.
Right,
And he billed the town for whatever those hours are,
right,
and that's part of his budget, and it's never much. The hourly rate that they charge is fairly reasonable, and
yeah,
he's been in Willington enough that he is familiar.
Sure.
But yeah. It would, well, let me.
I'm comfortable with it, they'll be one of the ones to review it, probably speak to it. We certainly talked about it before.
Yeah, so these are the numbers I remember.
Yeah. I think the getting rid of all those small ones and anything that's complicated where it says we have to divide it by the length of the driveway, you know what? That's. it's gonna create hassles and it's less clear and.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily require more review.
Right.
The 3 lot subdivision with a ton of change in topography, bringing in a lot of soil and bringing out, is gonna be a lot more complicated to review than a 10 lot subdivision in an old farm field that's flat and so. Yeah, just, simplify, but also not try to pull out, a pound of flesh.
I mean, something's gonna happen here. We've seen a lot of parcels getting opened up, getting sold and moved and. Some fairly good sized chunks of land, so. Somebody's gonna do something.
Yeah, I think. Eventually,
It'll be a challenge. Put those hats back on.
you'll dust them off. Okay, so yeah, if you're good with this, then it would just be recommend to the board of selectmen, we can make changes. Whatever you guys.
Someone wanna make a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion that, the commission forwards this fee schedule to the Board of Selectmen.
Second.
Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Very good. That was the subject of quite a few discussions.
Yes, it was. Yeah, good ones too.
Yep. Okay, where are we at? We're at item G, approval of minutes, May 6, 2025. So,
It's from May 6th, 2025.
I'll second.
okay, Andy second, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, item 8, correspondence. Number 1, commissioner training opportunities.
So there was just the Center for Land Use Education. They just put out like their sort of early summer training, so what I think I'll do is, I will forward you the email that just shows all of the things that they're doing and which ones are in person, which ones are virtual, which ones are this and that, and so rather than going through and trying to say what they're doing and what the dates are, we'll include that and send it to you guys in an email so you can see it. If any of you are interested, they don't all cost, but if you're interested in one that has a fee associated, just let us know, we can get you registered.
Can you tell us what the required, Joe?
Yeah, so, because now it's by term, you guys have a little bit more time because your terms are longer. Some of the towns, the term is like 2 years, and so they're sort of always under the gun, but, yeah. So I'll send that so that we don't just sit and go through it. And then the only other thing I just wanted to mention, and I'll just do a quick demo so you can see it, so we can all sort of be on the same page that something is happening with it. We have the codification back. And so the landing page is not quite set up yet, but this will ultimately be what is on the website. And so when you come into the code, you'll have all the various ordinances and regulations sort of here. So these are all the general government ordinances that are adopted, which have been codified and are all searchable. And then we have our forest practices and the wetland subdivision and zoning. So you come down to zoning. We have the organization, which is in line with the current organization that we have now, but you'll see that they've adjusted the way that kind of how these are organized. So these are all the headings that come right out of the zoning regs now. So again, you search through them. Let's say you wanted to look at the R80 zones, and you can click on any of these.
Nice.
And so we're now moved to a alternating letter, which does a couple of things. Number one, it shortens the code because we don't have as much wasted sort of white space, but it's not a 5.02, 0.01, 0.02, 0.01 scenario. So all that stuff is in there. Anytime we have a reference, it's now linked, so if you click on it and hover over it, it'll bring you, it shows you that section. And then you applicants, whomever, you can click on any of these headings and you can copy them, copy the links right to the section you can email. And then you can also download any version of the code in PDF or Word document. It's formatted correctly. It has all the references. So for us, it's nice because if I'm telling someone, yeah, you can have a daycare in that zone, I can click this and I can copy this link into the email. And when they click it, it'll take them right to that section of the regs.
Excellent.
But also, you can create an account and you can add your own notes, you can mark them up, you can subscribe to updates. So if you're in the DC zone and you're a business owner and you want to know if they're changing it, you can subscribe to updates. So anytime we post an update to that zone, it'll notify you that that code section has been changed.
What website is this? It's in the town website.
Yeah, so this is through E-code. So this is like a third party. And this was the project that we did through ARPA. So they went through and did that whole organization. Remember, I went through and read all those comments and so they did all of that and they digitized the whole code. So we're in the final sort of stages now.
So the link of the town site will go to this site, so it
Yep.
stays stable.
Yep. And
So
so,
he has to be fussing with that all the time.
right. And that,
Our town websites are pretty neat.
yeah,
Needs a refresh.
yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that'll be nice is you'll be able to, from these drop downs, you'll be able to go through every iteration of the code. So when we make amendments, you can come back and click and say, I want to see what the regs were in 2025 or whatever. And you can go back through those versions and they will, as you can see here, every time they make a change, they will note the section and all of that will be in there. So you'll be able to see.
Sort of like the code of the state regs when you go
Right.
through and all the changes.
So we'll know what sections were changed. So this will allow us to keep everything up to date, formatted correctly. It's much more accessible. It is mobile device friendly. So you can pull it up on your phone and it'll right size so that it all works and you can do all the funny stuff with it. So the subdivision regs are there, all the inland wetland regs are there. In the sort of that same format, and then, yeah, we've got all the town government ones are in there as well. So if you wanted to search and you wanted to just type building, it'll tell you.
Get all of the.
Right, but then you can say, well, I'm not interested in that, I'm only interested in buildings that are in the zoning regulations, so you can
Yeah.
click that and you can filter. So it's kind of nice and functional and will help us to be consistent. We found through this process, several regulations, ordinances that weren't current, hadn't been transmitted, were incomplete, so they are checking all of that. And then they will give us 2 master copies, and every time we do an amendment, they will send us a supplement, so that we always have in the building. Yeah, it's a nice thing to have.
Are most towns going to this format so that we look like other towns too?
Yeah, they have many towns in the state. And then there's a sort of what I think is a less desirable, but there's a competitor, Unicode, that also does this, but more and more towns are moving in this direction for their zoning regs. Because it's makes them much more accessible.
Absolutely. How much does it cost to publish a book, I wonder?
What do you mean?
Well, we used to have the zoning regs in our book.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, we can do that in-house, still, I mean. Yeah, that's what I was gonna show you. So the other thing is they have an index.
Probably less than.
But we can run versions, but yeah, so they also do an index. So if you wanted to see, where a specific term is mentioned, so then here's all this section. So it's kind of nice if you're hunting for something, you're like, I know it was this. But if you go into the code, and we can do this, when we get the final version ready to go, we will make you a new version, but we just download a PDF. And it's all formatted for Word, so it looks like these were this this is created from this.
Yeah, right.
So it's all formatted, correctly.
I would, I was just saying it would probably be cheaper to buy an inexpensive tablet
Oh,
just for your zoning regs than it would
Yes.
be to actually print out,
yes.
formally publish a bound copy of the zoning regs.
Yeah, a lot of towns, Vernon is probably the closest. Mansfield does this. They have, like a Chromebook
That's what I'm
that
saying.
they give to the
I mean, if
commission.
if the commission just bought 7 tablets.
Yeah.
And when you come as a commissioner,
Mhm.
at the meeting, you get your
Yep.
tablet with your nameplate. And
Yep.
you look how many regs you want.
And that's how they do all the packets, so that, they would have just a shared folder, and so rather than emailing it, they drop all that information onto that.
Save a few trees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
save a few trees and complexity.
Some commissions really wanna have the digital, cause they can have it, and they can look at it, and they can mark it up, and they can save it, and they can, some towns don't. Or some commissions like it all on paper.
Yeah, everybody's here.
Yeah.
Very good.
That is all I have.
All right, so that brings us to public participation for items not listed on the agenda. Yes, Ralph.
Oh, give me a minute here. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay. Mike, a while back, I'd sent you an email about questioning a design commercial zone on a particular lot. And what I discovered digging a little deeper into it is starting with the 2004 Plan of Conservation and Development. They were accompanied by a series of maps. And there were 2 maps. One was zoning and the other was existing land use. And I was comparing some of that with the assessor cards. So what I found was that there are a couple locations that are identified on a map in one version of the POCD as a design commercial zone. Reality was they were just a commercial use classification by the assessor, which in turn influenced the existing use maps. And I think as the POCDs transitioned to today, some of that got confused or cross-referenced. So there's some lots that are identified as being in a DC zone that there was never a formal design commercial zone established. And the one specific lot that I had mentioned to you, it is clearly a commercial use from the assessor's perspective. And the existing land use map shows it as commercial use, but somehow that also got transferred to the zoning map. So I think there's some, well, for lack of a better term, typographical errors that evolved over time as the POCDs evolved. And I just wanted to share that with Mike because I didn't want him chasing in the wrong direction to discover what the heck happened here. So that's all I had. Any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them, but it was just something I stumbled upon and I wanted to see if it could get squared away at some point.
I mean, my first thought would be, if you looked at multiple parcels, that if you sent them to me, the commission could look at them and they would know. He had asked me about a specific parcel and he said, I don't remember this being zoned commercial, but the zoning map shows it as commercial. I went back through and I couldn't find anything specific, but if you look at the POCDs and all the old documents as he's talking about, it says that it's commercial. And so, it's going way back before me. I don't know about the zone changes, but it's not inconceivable that a future land use map or current land use map may get converted to a zoning map. And so if you have parcels that are being shown as a commercial zone, but were never subject to a zone change application, then I don't know, the commission would have to kind of figure out what to do. Option 1 would be codify a version of the zoning map and just sort of endorse it saying this is correct so that we know going forward. If we determine that, well, no one remembers doing a zoning change for that, we have no evidence of it, and we're not sure that it should be. then we would have to figure out, do we make an amendment to the map? The only thing that would be tricky is if for the last 15 years, the owner assumed it was one zone. But I don't know the parcels, but.
When zoning was first brought in, were all existing commercial operations automatically changed to commercial zones?
I think this is like,
Zoning came in at what, 70, in the 70s?
1970 was.
I think this is like the, prior to the previous P O C D, so not quite that far
So
back
this
in
is,
time.
yes, all right, so this isn't,
30 years ago.
this, yeah, so I'm just saying, there was no zoning, so every single commercial business would have had a right to be there. So de facto, they're a commercial zone.
Yeah,
But this is more or less a commercial use that on the map just got said, oh, well, it must be a commercial zone there, and maybe it never really was.
maybe.
But it must be a pretty good operation. It looks commercial rather than residential. That's interesting.
I mean, one of them is the, I don't know what it is, what it was, the, right down here, the. Place with all the cars stacked up right to the road.
West garage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like that was, it's shown on the zoning map as a commercial zone.
Okay, because that was there before zoning.
Right. But it, and on the previous POCDs, it's shown as a commercial zone.
I mean, I think it would have had to, you'd be pretty hard pressed to say that that garage was clearly there. When zoning was established, so for someone to not say that's a commercial zone would have been rather odd, in my opinion, that would have been strange.
Well, when the West bought it, it was a business.
Yeah, it was the Hyatt.
Yeah.
Hyatt used to get ice cream down there.
The issue there is 184 Tallinn Turnpike is the package store. And I think that came about post establishment of zoning.
Yes,
I would agree with you as far as the garage is concerned. I mean, I remember going in there for ice cream as a kid for the Memorial Parade, so we're going back quite a few years. But
way back.
there's nothing to prevent that from being in an R80 zone with a non-conforming commercial use, which is what, in my mind, it's always been. A commercial use, but not a formal commercial design commercial zone. And I think there's a distinction between the two that we all need to be a little cautious about. That's all.
That's a good point.
You know, there's a couple of implications outside of planning and zoning with this, and it has to do with taxation and how the assessor classifies the property and the use. So there are situations, I think, where you get taxed because of use differently than the real zone that it exists in. Anyway, just something I stumbled across, folks. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but I think it's something if we can catch where the hiccups are and fix them, it would be probably beneficial to do so. Anyway, that's all I had.
Thank you, Ralph. All right, item J, staff report discussion. Item number 1, Holster Road update.
I just was gonna mention that Polster Road has been striped correctly, the right material, so it should last a little bit longer.
Okay, only cost you a few hours of your life.
Only, yeah, more than a few hours. But I think Troy went out, looked at it. I haven't seen it myself yet, but I'm hoping that everything
Everybody's happy.
to be determined, but that, yeah, that's done. And codification, I guess I skipped ahead from before, so I showed you.
Okay, so that was what you were talking about too. All right, which brings us to item K. It's 8:25 PM, meeting adjourned.
Okay.